Zelensky just approved a 40-day countdown. Not a ceasefire, a campaign. Deep strikes on Russian oil, fuel, and military infrastructure designed to force Moscow to end the war. Moscow's main refinery is already so damaged it won't resume production this year. 39 more drones intercepted over the capital this morning. The clock is running, and Russia knows it. Ukraine is preparing to intensify pressure on Russia beyond the front line. On June 25th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that he had approved a new 40-day operation by the Security Service of Ukraine, aimed at compelling Russia to end its full-scale war. The announcement came after a briefing from Major General Yevhen Kamara, the acting head of the SBU, on what Zelensky described as Ukraine's long-range and medium-range sanctions campaign, a term Kyiv uses for deep strike operations against military and strategic targets inside Russia.
Report by Major General Yevgeny Kamara on our long-range sanctions plan, mid-range sanctions, and the results of the Security Service of Ukraine, specifically the Center of Special Operations Alpha on the front.
According to Zelensky, the operation is designed to increase pressure on Moscow, while Ukraine continues expanding long-range drone and missile strikes against Russian military and industrial infrastructure.
I approved a 40-day influence operation for the service against the aggressor state, aimed at compelling it to end the war. Importantly, for several months in a row, the SSU has demonstrated the highest performance in defending Ukraine's positions on the front lines through the use of various types of drones. The Center of Special Operations Alpha leads in terms of the occupiers' personnel and equipment neutralized.
Zelensky did not disclose operational details. However, the announcement follows months of increasingly sophisticated Ukrainian strikes targeting oil refineries, fuel depots, logistics hubs, and military facilities deep inside Russia. The SBU's elite Alpha Special Operations Unit has played a central role in many of those drone operations.
We also separately discussed challenges to Ukraine's internal security. I am grateful for the protection of our state and Ukrainians.
The announcement was followed by another reported wave of long-range drone attacks. According to Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin, Russian air defenses intercepted at least 39 Ukrainian drones approaching the Russian capital during the early hours of June 26th. Russian emergency services were deployed to inspect damage from falling debris, although Ukrainian authorities had not commented on the reported operation at the time. The reported attack came just days after one of Ukraine's largest drone assaults on Moscow since the start of the full-scale invasion by Putin. According to the Kyiv Independent, the earlier strike damaged the Moscow oil refinery, while Reuters, citing industry sources on June 24th, reported the facility is unlikely to resume production this year because of the extent of the damage. Kyiv says these deep strike operations are intended to degrade Russia's military logistics and energy infrastructure while increasing pressure on the Kremlin to negotiate an end to the war, as Moscow continues large-scale missile and drone attacks against targets across Ukraine. For months, Moscow believed time was on its side. The Kremlin expected political divisions in the West to grow, support for Ukraine to weaken, and pressure to mount on Kyiv to accept a negotiated settlement. But new reports suggest that the calculation may be changing. According to Ukrainian officials, US President Donald Trump has privately encouraged President Volodymyr Zelensky to take a more assertive approach, signaling what Kyiv sees as growing support from Washington for efforts to pressure Russia into meaningful negotiations. A senior Ukrainian official told the Kyiv Independent that Trump urged Zelensky to act more boldly and expressed skepticism that Russian President Vladimir Putin would make meaningful concessions without facing increased pressure. This comes as Ukraine intensifies efforts to secure a direct meeting between Zelensky and Putin, an idea Trump reportedly supports, but one that Moscow has continued to avoid. The shift appears to have unsettled Moscow, where officials had expected Trump to pressure Ukraine into a rapid peace deal more favorable to the Kremlin. Instead, Russia now sees the US moving closer to Kyiv on key defense issues, including air defense, long-range capabilities, and possible technology licensing. The Financial Times reported that Trump was hugely impressed by Ukraine's ability to strike Russian military and industrial targets far from the front line. Those attacks have increasingly exposed Russia's vulnerability at home and challenged the Kremlin's claim that time is on Moscow's side. The reported shift comes after the G7 summit in France, where leaders agreed to increase support for Ukraine's air defense, long-range capabilities, and domestic weapons production. The summit also revived discussions on tougher sanctions targeting Russia's energy sector. Moscow has reacted with growing frustration. Recent attacks have targeted oil facilities, logistics routes, and military-related infrastructure deep inside Russia. On June 18th, Ukraine launched what was described as the largest drone attack on Moscow since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. Zelensky on June 23rd praised his country's strike forces and said their pressure is making Russians question the ongoing war.
Every day it is clear that Ukrainian precision is working. I am grateful to all the forces involved. Unmanned systems forces, special operations forces, security service, military intelligence, all our units. Thank you. This pressure of ours and every other form of pressure on Russia must continue to work and work for peace. The majority in Russia is already complaining to Russian President Vladimir Putin that his war has no end in sight. All the current difficulties for the Russians should bring them closer to the idea that this is their war, and it is not just a stone from the sky, and that their war must end.
Meanwhile, Putin publicly addressed the attacks for the first time, arguing that Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory only strengthen Moscow's determination to continue military operations.
Everything that is being done in this regard by this very Kyiv regime, which I have just mentioned, is being done with a single aim: to create favorable conditions for itself in the event of the commencement, or, more precisely, the resumption of peace talks, which were, incidentally, interrupted on Ukraine's own initiative, from so-called positions of strength. What positions of strength? It can only be a matter of creating the impression of some sort of strong position, because the reality on the battlefield looks completely different. Our military units, as we know, and I will speak more about this shortly, are advancing every day. Secondly, all these terrorist attacks, including strikes on civilian infrastructure, such as the attack on a coach carrying Belarusian children in the Bryansk region or on a student hall of residence in Starobelsk, do not and cannot influence, nor are they capable of influencing, the events unfolding at the front on the line of contact, where, as I have already said, Russian troops are liberating. One settlement after another, one territory after another. What's more, I believe that such attacks, particularly those targeting children, naturally spur our troops on the battlefield to carry out the tasks set for them by the country, because they see and understand who we are dealing with. There is simply no other way to describe this regime other than as neo-Nazi. It doesn't even cross one's mind to think otherwise. We haven't seen anything like this since the Second World War. This is particularly true of attacks on children.
Yet, in a notable shift of tone, Putin also stated that Russia remains prepared to resume negotiations with Ukraine based on the framework of the previously discussed Istanbul agreements. The contradiction reflects a growing dilemma for the Kremlin.
Russia, however, as has been stated on numerous occasions, is ready for peace talks with Ukraine. It is ready on the basis of the agreements reached back in Istanbul and, I would remind you, initialed at the time by the Ukrainian delegation. This means that they were satisfied with everything. I see no reason for us to deviate from these agreements. On the basis of the agreements reached in Istanbul, on the basis of the modalities discussed in Anchorage and the realities, most importantly, the realities on the ground, as well as the principles I set out a couple of years ago during a speech at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We will build on what we have, and we will continue to move forward with confidence in all directions, ensuring the safety of our citizens.
As Ukraine expands its reach and international support shows signs of hardening rather than weakening, Moscow finds itself confronting a reality it may not have anticipated. The question now is whether increased pressure will finally bring Russia to the negotiating table or push the conflict into an even more dangerous phase.